we're going to talk about the oscillator on the Arturia MicroBrute. This oscillator arrangement is very similar to the oscillator arrangement found on the Arturia MiniBrute. In fact, and don't tell Arturia this, but this thing is more powerful than the oscillator on the MiniBrute. And I'm not entirely sure if they know that, but it is. It's more powerful, and I'll show you how. First, let's start off with the waveforms we have available. I'm going to start off with the Sawtooth wave. Pretty standard Sawtooth wave. You control the octave with the octave buttons, like on the MiniBrute. You have a decent range. So that's awesome. But like on the MiniBrute, we don't have to stop there. Each of these waveforms has their own sort of waveform augmentation that makes the waveform able to make more than just its own normal sound. So with the Sawtooth, we have UltraSaw, which multiplies the sawtooth of the sawtooth and creates a sort of, well, it's kind of akin sounding to like a pulse width modulation, but with saws. And it sounds like this. As you're listening to that, I hope you're hearing that what you're getting with this effect is basically the equivalent of a detuned, two detuned oscillators, or an oscillator and a further oscillator detuned, which is to say two oscillators that are not quite in perfect tune with each other, which is one of the reasons that you seek a multiple oscillator synthesizer, like a two oscillator synthesizer, is because you want the sound of two oscillators not quite in tune because you get this great phasing effect. So here we have our only one oscillator monosynth, which already gives you the ability to sound as if there are multiple oscillators. And that was a great design by Arturia. So the myth that this is only a single oscillator is already questioned by this. But that's a great sound, and you can affect how this UltraSaw works using the mod matrix, which we will get to when we talk about the mod matrix. And then let's have a listen to the square wave. Pretty standard square wave, and you can adjust the octave using the octave buttons. And with our square wave, we have the ability to adjust the pulse width, and that is just adjusting the width of the square wave itself. Starts off with 50% duty cycle and goes up to some other percentage I don't know, but gives us a nice, what is usually termed pulse sound. And of course, if you want, you can turn this knob and have manual pulse width modulation. Or if you would like to have voltage controlled pulse width modulation, we can do it with the mod matrix quite extensively, which I will show you when we get to the mod matrix. Sorry, I keep referring to the mod matrix. You're probably going, okay, why don't you stop referring to it and show me how it works? But I promise I will. It's just that I'm talking about the oscillator right now, and I don't want like the syrup to mix with my sausage, or that sounds terrible. Okay, let's talk about this triangle wave. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the Arturia triangle wave has a nice punch to it. And we have multiple octaves. Pretty serious bass. So there's your triangle. And once again, with the triangle, we have what is called the Metalizer, which is, I'm told, a wave folder. And this does some pretty messy things to our very quiet, staid triangle by making it into an aggressive monster. Yes, that's right. The quietest, softest, most gentle of the waveforms is converted into something really monstrous with this Metalizer. And okay, so when you have a single oscillator monosynth, the sad thing about it is you're limited to some pretty basic waveforms. You either have like a sawtooth or a square, or sometimes you can have the sawtooth and mix it with the square. But even so, you're limited in the waveforms you can create. Well, with the Mini Brute and the MicroBrute as well, you have such an incredible possibility for creating a variety of varying waveforms, because you can mix all of these waveforms together, and you can alter these waveforms using these different means of mangling the original waveform. So even with the triangle alone in the Metalizer, does this sound like a triangle to you? It's something, it almost sounds like a DX7 to me. Maybe I'm going crazy. But so already you have the ability to just have such an incredible diversity of waveform, even just with the triangle alone. But then we start adding in these other sounds, other waveforms. And you can say, yeah, it's only a one oscillator synth, but holy cow, you could create a huge diversity of waveforms by mixing and matching all of these different waveforms and the various ways that they can be modulated over time. And right now we're not even modulating them using the mod matrix. So you can create some incredibly complex and diverse waveforms with this only single oscillator. Now, I've killed one myth. You can detune this single oscillator. 2, you have way more waveform diversity than you would get from some 2 and even 3 oscillator monosynths. Now I'm going to do something that just totally blew my mind when I found out about it. The last thing that you want multiple oscillators for is to allow one oscillator to be set to one pitch and the other oscillator to be set to a different pitch, which you can't do, obviously, with a single oscillator. Or can you? I'm not sure how Arturia does this, and I'm sure someone will comment in the comment section telling me how sometime in the future. Arturia has given you an extra note. So often in synthesizers, we set the second oscillator like a fifth up. That's a very common setting, that or an octave. But the fifth is something we can't do with a single oscillator until now. Have a listen. Okay, this is just the Sawtooth wave. Yeah, okay, that is one oscillator set to one note and one oscillator set to a fifth above, but we're only talking about one oscillator here. I'm not sure how they do it. I think maybe it's a filter with resonance that boosts the second harmonic. Is it the second harmonic? That might be what it is. But in any case, for the first time, you have a single oscillator that makes 2 notes that aren't the same pitch. And that's incredible. And you might be able to say, well, that's not something I'd use very often. But listen if you're not someone who would do that, listen to what else you can do with it. Okay, let's go back to the triangle wave, right? Okay. Whoa, turn off the Metalizer. Triangle. Sweet, kind, gentle, kind of dark. Let's add in a little of overtone. Yes, by adding that fifth, you're actually adding a little bit of high frequency harmonics, some high frequency harmonics to this sound to brighten up the high end of the triangle. Now, it doesn't sound like you're playing a fifth there. It just sounds like the triangle has gotten brighter. And that's the trick with harmonics and oscillators. If you have multiple oscillators and you don't do them equal volumes, the harmonic content of one oscillator can enrich the general sound of the second oscillator without sounding like multiple pitches. And that's what we're doing here. But again, this is all just one oscillator. It's kind of blowing my mind. So there's a lot that can be done with this fifth, this Overtone fifth. And like the MicroBrute, we also have a sub-oscillator. So if you want to add punch to, like, let's turn on the square wave here. You have a square wave, and it's playing one pitch, and you'd like it to also have the pitch an octave below. So you're playing octaves, then of course you turn up the sub-oscillator, which gives a fuller sound and allows you to have some bass, which is one of the cool things that happened in the MicroBrute. This sub-oscillator is a little less robust because there isn't as much functionality associated with it, but still, you've got a sub-oscillator, and that's awesome. And it doesn't stop there. This is where things just keep on getting crazy. We can balance the sub-oscillator and the fifth in the overtone because they're all part of the same section. Listen. That is 50% sub-oscillator, 50% fifth. And what it does is it just makes the, in this case, square wave have this weirdly fuller sound. Here, listen. Because of that weird volume thing and harmonic content, etc., this is like a timbral spice. It's like the monosodium glutamate of the synthesizer. And so all of the things that you would want a second oscillator for, the MicroBrute almost provides all of them. And we can just turn all of this stuff on. Look where we go. And yeah, that sound has some serious edge to it, but it doesn't have to. That's why we have a filter, but we'll get to the filter. But I always say that the most interesting part of the synthesizer should be the oscillator. Yeah, the filter's great. We all love what filters do, but people rely too much on the filter. And usually they do because the oscillator section is so boring. But Arturia has really hit it out of the park with their particular arrangement for an oscillator. And it's no less here. Let me point out something about this. The MicroBrute doesn't have the overtone. This oscillator is actually, to some degree, more powerful than the one you'd find in the MicroBrute. And it's on this smaller, less expensive synthesizer. That's why I think it's really important. That's why I think this is a great synthesizer. Sounding oscillator. That is a very basic outline of the MicroBrute oscillator.